Welcome to the Progress Portland podcast. I'm Kip Silverman. My co-host is
Kat.
Kat. And we have a really special guest today, Tiffany Koyama Lane. I can say your name, right? Councilor no, I can't.
No, you
Koyama Lane
can't.
was graciously joined our podcast when she was running as candidate for city council and graciously agreed to come back and talk to us about everything she's done over the last year and a half in great detail. So go for it. No. Hi.
Sounds great. I'm happy to be here. I'll just take up the next 6 hours and
Perfect.
just keep going.
Sure.
This is
Sure.
kind of fun because last
Yeah.
time we did this in person.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. This is kind of nice because I don't know about you guys, but you can wear jammies and slippers and just be cozy at home. Anyway, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm okay. I am hanging in there. Today is the last day of school at Portland Public Schools. So my kids are in about an hour and a half going to be finishing 3rd and 4th grade, and they will be 4th and 5th graders. And we are getting closer to the end of this budget season. So, I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, I think that is probably top of mind for most people who pay attention to any of this stuff is the budget. My experience with watching the city council wrestle with budgets, whether last year or prior years, have always been pretty brutal. Last year, you were coming into it pretty new and just learning how everything works. How has this year's experience been compared to last year? And there's a lot of a weird esoteric feel to it this year that there's just these strange vibes happening while you could try to dial things in. Really curious about how it all feels to you.
Yeah. I think the budget process is always work and is always tough. Council President Dunphy has done a lot of things to make this year go a bit more smoothly, and he has really done a great job facilitating. And yeah, absolutely, there are a lot of different personalities up there, and I think that you're right with the vibes. And there are some things specifically that I would like to see different next year. I think there's always going to be room for improvement. I just submitted today a budget note that I hope will get added to this budget about the budget process, asking the administration to come back and give us a report, give us some concrete ways that we can improve things like timelines, making sure that community members have more time to review public documents, provide comments, want the administrative side to compile community testimony. I want the mayor to actually say in his proposed budget what parts were informed by the public. I want him to be able to actually link that proposal that he brings to us to council priorities. So hoping that we can continue to iterate and get better and better. I think just being the second time going through the budget made it a little bit easier. We knew what to expect a little bit more. And I'll say I personally have just gotten to a place where I can very much trust my team, lean on my staff. I have a really incredible head of staff, and I have folks that help with policy and constituent work and comms. And so that's been great. And this year, something I did differently was making an actual budget survey, and was able to talk to someone from every single neighborhood in District 3 and get feedback. And I felt more confident that I was representing my constituents and what I was hearing. Pretty much all of the amendments I brought were ones that constituents had asked me to bring or brought to my attention. So, don't want to be Pollyanna about the whole process. There are definitely hard things, but I do see us moving in a better direction. Overall, going back to your first question too, how I'm doing, I do feel really supported at home with my kids and my partner, and also in City Hall with my team. So that's a great thing.
I noticed that last year and some of the other things that council was asked to continue or keep in place, it seemed that there was a little bit of a, let's just keep it as we're still learning what all these cogs in the machine do. And then this year, leading up to the budget process and process itself, I got a sense that you and other council members started to pull threads and say like, well, what does this department do? What does this position do? And how relevant is it, or is it redundancy? I noticed as much as I love that, I also noticed there was a lot of pushback on just trying to ask questions of why. Why does this work? Why was this made? Do we still need it? Do you have any insight on that?
I think that's exactly right. Setting up this new form of government, all of us being new to these specific counselor roles, I think a lot of us came into it being pretty open. And I have said multiple times on the dais and warned Mayor Wilson, look, you have given us a timeline and a date for when you're going to solve all of our problems around homelessness. And so I'm not going to come for your budget as much this year, but next year we'll be asking some harder questions and we'll be pushing more. And so I have been really out in the open about that. And I think you can see other areas too where myself and other counselors have felt more comfortable pushing, asking questions. When we get answers of like, oh, this is just how it has to be, really wanting to dig in ourselves a bit more and just having that confidence of now understanding a little bit more how to read a budget, how to work with our budgeting office and ask different questions and see what's possible. Talk more about trade-offs. And I will say something that I'm wrapping up this budget feeling, and some of my colleagues as well, is that as soon as we finish up this budget process, we want to find a way to make sure that we are starting the next budget process on July 1st. What I do see in this budget is the mayor really is doing that proposed budget by himself. And then we're kind of trying to come in and pick at a few things and make some small changes. But what does it look like for us to have a process that really does include council, where we're getting to give input, you know, before April, before May, when so many of the kind of bigger decisions are made. And so the hope is that we're able to even be pulling more, maybe even bigger threats and able to be part of that process. So that's part of what my budget note is hoping to start saying, okay, administrative side, what's the debrief? What's the after action summary? And then we're also going to be doing our work as council too. And we want to be part of this process earlier, and we want the public to be part of the process. We want to know how you take those pieces, Mr. Mayor, and then incorporate them or choose to not incorporate them into your proposal.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I love that budget note and the mindfulness behind it because, like we've said or I've said frequently on this podcast, that every year the budget starts out in severe austerity measures, always cutting public safety first and then figuring something else out. And sometime in August, September, there's more money found each time. But you've already lost staff, you've already lost brain trust. And it just seems so fakakta to do things this way. Is there an idea behind doing impact studies for each of the cuts that are happening? Like if PPB is going to cut 30 of the 38 PS3 officers, what does that mean for the city and how do things change when back in 2020 when money was cut and they cut their street resource team. That was the first thing they went for was non-armed officers and not just focusing on PPB, but that's where I'm most familiar, but the impact of the services and how to monitor and gauge that.
Yeah, I think that is incredibly important. And I'm hearing more of my colleagues talk about that. And especially folks that have worked in other jurisdictions, they're also saying, hey, the way that the budget is being presented, while there have been improvements this year from last, there's still not clarity. I mean, we were figuring out on the dais, I think this week, like how many positions are being cut. We need to have those clear numbers and that we're still doing some of that digging at the last minute. I think that's a sign that we don't have all of the information and the impact analyses and the cross-service area budget analyses that we need. And so that is why it's really important as soon as this process is over that we're already starting to think about what needs to be different next time. And I'll say, I mean, this reminds me so much of what happens almost every year as a public school teacher, where you see people getting their pink slips and being laid off. And then the morale is horrible. I mean, two of my friends got notified yesterday, the end of the school day, right before the last day of school, that they are laid off. And what ends up happening is what you're saying in July or August, there will be this kind of rush. Oh, wait, actually, we can hire some of you back. Well, guess what? A lot of those teachers now will never work for Portland Public Schools again because they feel so harmed by the way that they were treated. And we've lost them to other jobs and other school districts. So really want to be thinking about how can we also be thinking about how we are as employers? How are we treating our
Right.
staff? Because they are real people with
Yeah.
families. I feel simple and silly to say that, but this is not a very human-centered way to be treating the people that actually are running our city.
No, it's very much a corporate mindset. My aunt used to work in the banks as a computer programmer in New York City. Whenever there was a merger or something, people got laid off all the time and banks would condense and condense and condense. And then what happens is everyone else is working 10-hour days, 5 days a
Mhm.
week, working weekends, testing things at midnight. Meanwhile, they could have kept, in theory, the staff they have, and people could have a more balanced life. And this is one of the things I do wonder about. And it sounds very simple, but when you let go of too many people, then you have people doing two or
Yep.
three jobs,
Yep.
and then they're getting overtime pay. So isn't the overtime pay going to sometimes cost more than actually keeping the staff?
Yeah, or they're getting overtime pay, or they're just expected to do more work. And so these are some questions I'm still currently a dues paying rank and file union member. Because of my strong union contract, I am on political leave and my job is safe for me, so I can go back to it. So I ask questions, like,
Mhm.
well, what's going to happen if we end up needing to hire people back by cutting these positions? Where's the work being shifted? What's happening there? And we've heard from our city administrator that they're planning to set aside a big chunk of money in case they've realized, oops, we've laid off too many people. And that is that corporate mindset where a lot of the folks that these are public servants, people who could be making more in other sectors. And this is not a great way to be treating our employees. And what I am hearing throughout the city is that morale is pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens every year around this that morale plummets. There's a public perception that city employees are just overpaid and it's a cushy job and everything. And I don't know anybody, except for maybe a couple administrators here and there, that have a cushy job, right? Or are maybe overpaid. But everybody works their asses off. And to keep throwing this mix in every year as budget comes around is detrimental to just having a productive city. Not only to mention, if you're laying off rank and file, then you need fewer administrators. What I don't see proposed frequently is people who are the top paid servants or administrative staff. Maybe they could take a 5% cut and not hurt that much. Portland Parks always has a backlog of maintenance. It has for as long as I've been aware of it, which has been about 17 years now, and it never gets caught up and the cost keeps growing, yet they're almost always the first people cut. What are we doing as a city for our communities? And I know that's more of a statement than a question, but I kind of want to get your sense, especially for D3, what you're hearing from your constituents and how these rank and file cuts are going to impact your district.
Well, and what we know is the folks who do the on the ground work, the people that are community facing, those are the folks that usually have the most trust. The teachers, the people who are actually mowing the grass at the
Mhm.
parks, the people that are running the community centers, and they're actually in the positions that community members really feel the impact of and see the impact of each day. And I think you're really right, Kip, that it's important for us to be thinking about those administrative positions and the high level management and be looking at those. And I was really proud to support Dunphy 4, which pauses COLA and merit pay for high earning
Mm.
employees that are in management. And so it's for folks that make above, I believe, 150K. And I think those types of actions are really important for all city workers to see that there's some shared sacrifice and there's some real understanding that everyone needs to be including management, feeling that we're making adjustments and we're taking cost savings seriously.
Do you know offhand? Now I'm curious what the wage gap is between some of the highest positions and then the lowest in parks? Just off.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know exactly, but I do know there are companies here in Portland that say they have like their own. They've adopted like the CEO can't make more than one
Mhm.
time, like two times, three times
Yeah.
the lowest paying employee. And Councilor Novak has talked about different types of fees on companies. If your CEO makes more than 100 times your
Mhm.
lowest paid employee, then you're going to have to pay some certain type of fee. I think those make a lot of sense. I mean, to me as a public school educator, I'm all for that. I think that makes so much sense. And if all the teachers know that the superintendent will never make more than X amount, X times the lowest paid teacher, there's a different level of connection and understanding and respect, I think. So I think it can be really strategic to be thinking about things that way.
Yeah, and in some instances, you don't necessarily have to reduce the pay of the top person so much as bring everyone up. Like I've been advocating that honestly, the base pay for a lot of jobs in Portland right now should be around 65 to 70,000 a year, just because of our cost of living. Groceries keep
Mhm.
going up, taxes keep going up, utilities keep going up. Some of that I know is beyond your control. When council has voted, yes, we're going to do this thing, because there was no other mechanism to find the money for certain things that are necessary to keep the infrastructure alive. But then it's like, so how can we all afford that, including teachers, including city council themselves? Because I know you also are paying the same taxes I am.
Something I get to do in this role that I didn't quite realize I'd get to do is just be influencing labor management when they're
Mhm.
bargaining. I would say most of my colleagues defer to me and listen to me with someone that has been a union, is a union organizer, has been a leader in my union, has been part of bargaining, has been on the strike line. And so I do get to like bring up things like that
Mhm.
and say, hey, I think it would be interesting to think about this when you're bargaining. And just to give you a little taste of sometimes the big disparity in pay, one of the things I'm looking at doing to save some positions or save one of the fire rescues in my district is looking at the city administrator wants to add 3 positions to his office. So he currently has 3. I thought he only had 1, so I was feeling a little bit more sorry for him, but he actually has 3 and he wants to add 3 more. And I do understand he has a big job, but looking at those a little bit more, I asked him, all right, if we were to cut one of those, which one would you ask that I look at first? And he said his chief of staff. And by cutting that, that's a package of it's over $300,000 just for that chief of
Wow.
staff. Yeah. One of my colleagues was like, wait, it's that much? I think that's just giving you a little taste of how much some folks are making in these positions.
Boy, that's a lot. I'm like, I clearly should have gone into public service because it pays off. Anyway, one of the things that everybody keeps coming back to is the Clean Energy Fund and wanting to rate it for different things. And what I haven't I'm curious about your thoughts on this. What I haven't heard articulated as well as I'd like to is that the thing everybody brings up is like it's collected so much more money than anybody expected it to originally. But the reason that is because it's on a profit basis of companies making a certain amount over a certain amount, which also goes to show you how much money corporations are actually making that it's funded this so much. But there's an opportunity here, I think, to unpack why it's been so successful and figure out how do we leverage that to make sure that we're not losing all the things these businesses really want to see, which are fewer people who are unhoused and safer streets and so on and so forth. Coming out of this budget season, are you aware of other possible initiatives to go unpack that kind of thing and pursue them beyond a arts tax or a street tax?
Yeah, I do sometimes get confused why it seems like people talk about it being bad that we've collected so much money through
Right.
like the
Right.
Portland Clean Energy Fund
Poor
or Preschool
corporations.
for
Think of the
All.
corporations, Tiffany.
Right. Or even, this, former Commissioner Hardesty helped us get the Office of Community-Based Police Accountability, and
Mhm.
5% of the police budget now goes towards that. And it's like, it's too much. We didn't realize how much we were going to get. I think that we can look to those examples, PSEF looking at some of our biggest corporations, or a Preschool for All looking at, some of the highest earners in our city, and see that there's actually way more resources there than we could have ever imagined. And I think that is something we need to keep looking at. Affordability is top of mind for so many people right now.
Yeah.
And it's so important that people are paying their fair share. And I think that's a pretty, not very radical thing to be saying right now? What does it look like for people that really can to be paying what they can? And thinking about, the arts tax, we were able to make some adjustments to make it a little bit better, but really there's work there, and I would like us to see work on that more to make it a progressive tax and think
Yes.
about a way that there are different tiers and making sure that any revenue raising is not on the backs of everyday Portlanders that really can't afford it, but are on people and corporations that have the means to do so. When we were looking at the transportation utility fee and the street repair fee, we're talking about what would it look like to have a package delivery fee that we've seen in some other states. So for hopefully that would impact companies like Amazon, companies that are using our streets, a food delivery fee. We just want to make sure that any of those that we adopt are not going to just end up falling on everyday Portlanders. So I want to make sure we do those really well. Have been looking into a vacancy fee that has been implemented in places like San Francisco and some places in Colorado that are getting revenue. And with that also want to make sure that we don't just slap that on and just do it, but make sure that we're doing the research. So I've been meeting with some different electeds in those cities that have adopted those. Pendleton did it also, I believe, and seeing, okay, how much revenue is it raising and is it actually filling your storefronts? Because there's kind of
Right.
two different things that outcomes that you can get there, and maybe you get both, but are continuing to look into that and also directing the bureaus to look into it also. So councilors Canal have talked about that a lot, and Avalos and Dunphy and even a few others.
I think one of the things is that, yeah, paying more fees, more taxes, it definitely is hard for everybody. And even if it's not, almost everyone says, man, I don't want to pay more. We know this. But when you actually see it being used, where you can tell, like, oh, I pay this arts tax, and now I'm seeing that this museum or this children's theater is thriving because they are saying they're benefiting directly, or this grant was given. It's not as terrible as when it just feels like it's sitting in a pot somewhere. It's not even so much the tax, but it's the execution that concerned me with a number of different
Yes.
bureaus where you all were finding, hey, there's a million over here and there's a million over there. And what is this and what's that? And then figuring out what is earmarked and cannot be touched. And then what is kind of general funds within that bureau. And finding all that broke, I think, a lot of people's heads this year, including
Yeah.
you and everyone on council.
That's exactly right. There are so many folks who are willing to invest in our city, but want to make sure that their dollars are actually being well spent and aren't being forgotten. And so that's why it's so important that we're showing that we are being good stewards of dollars and are taking these decisions seriously. And yeah, I completely agree with you there. And when the transportation utility fee kicks in, what I've been promised is that in every district all around Portland, you're going to just be able to start seeing a lot more repairs happening and work starting. So that will be incredibly important. I see it as a big part of our job as counselors to also be organizing and be educating and sharing to the public. Here's what this fee is. Here's what it's doing. And I spend a lot of time with my team helping folks sign up for discounts on their water bill, on their electricity bill, and just making sure that people know that that's an option. There are a ton of different ways that you can sign up for a reduction and not pay for the transportation utility fee. So making sure that we're putting that out there and letting our constituents know that we can help navigate and help them navigate some of those things, I think is really important and is part of our job as counselors.
That's awesome. I mean, I learned recently that if you have some large older trees on your property, you can go fill out a PDF form, which is a terrible user experience, but it will reduce your water bill 15, 20, possibly 30%, which I'm like, maybe that's why it's a PDF. They don't want too many people, doing it. But in that vein, I subscribe to your newsletter and I appreciate how often you communicate. But when you were asking your constituents what do you want to see, how are you thinking about this, how are you thinking about that, it's hard for me not to fill it out because I'm not in your district, but I want to because I love that level of engagement. I remember when we first talked to you, you were talking about how if you get elected, how you're thinking about moving your experience as a teacher and working with young people and parents to working with the community at large who are probably mostly not always, excuse me, as polite. I don't think you phrased it that way, but that's what I was thinking. Like, all right, kids screaming, you could say, hey, calm down now. Adults screaming, you're like, shut up. No, anyway, I'm curious about how the constituent engagement has been. I know you guys are out there a lot doing stuff. How's that been feeling compared to your previous career? Let's put it that way.
The constituent engagement is hands down my favorite part. And that's where I love to spend my time. My team is very protective over me and and they'll pay attention to kind of, is my cup full? And they're like, okay, we need to get her in community and out of City Hall. Totally prefer to be in district, and really felt like it was sold to me as like 50%, legislation and City Hall and 50% constituent services. It feels like it's not quite 50-50. I was elected. I was proud to be the first council vice president. And so last year I was really in City Hall every single day, and now have been able to, on Mondays and Fridays, make sure that I get to stay in district and do more constituent engagement and take my meetings in district. So I do send my newsletter every Friday. It's the same thing that I did in my almost 20 years of teaching. I sent one out every Friday and have told my team it's important to me that people know when to expect it, because
Yeah.
just like with the caregivers in my class, you kind of have to train them to be like, oh yeah, this is when it comes, and get ready for it, and be like, oh, that's that newsletter. So that is a way. I mean, it goes out to, I think, about 10,000 people. And we can tell from things like the survey, where we got over 600 responses, that people are reading it. And also, Kip, you can
Nice.
fill it out the survey, because there was a place there to just say, like, I'm in a different district too. So
Oh,
you're
really?
welcome. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. You shouldn't have said that.
I always
I
tell,
like your newsletter because yours always feels like an educational thing. Like you're telling people this exists in case you've never known. Fill out this survey, or this is what's happening currently in City Hall. Councilor Canal also has a very similar vibe and educational point of view. And it's a really nice contrast because the mayor's newsletter is always the sky is falling and back me up.
yep.
So that's
Yeah.
going to be my dig.
Yep. Yeah, I try to balance it with like, here's what I'm doing. Here are some opportunities for you. I have, over the last year and a half, had every month different ways that constituents can come hang out with me, connect with me in person, whether that's through a constituent coffee or through kind of more of a forum with maybe some other counselors. But every month have done some constituent coffees, which are just a huge highlight for me. I think constituent work has been great. I love it. I don't think that it is. Look, I taught kindergarten for many years, and there's nothing as like fierce as a kindergarten parent who's sending their first kid into the public school system, and there's so many feelings, and so I have a very high tolerance. Yeah, very high
I
tolerance.
thought you were going to say there's nothing harder than a 6-year-old with a crayon who's like, I'm going to color you, man, or something.
No, I mean, I will say there are times I feel it more with my colleagues on council where I'm like, ooh, I wish that you could be put in timeout. Or like, maybe some of my first grade students could like help us just talk about naming our feelings and externalizing them so we don't just make these harmful decisions. Sometimes more like that within City Hall. But in terms of constituents, I can always just like it just makes sense. As a teacher, you're representing this bigger system. And so people are going to bring different things with them, their own experience when they were a kid, some of their fears for their own child. And so I'm representing government. I mean, especially in these times, like that brings a lot for people. And so I have a pretty high tolerance there and can meet constituents even if we don't agree, and just say, look, like I still want to hear you out. That's okay. We're not going to agree on every single thing. There's no one I agree with on every single thing. That would be weird.
Yeah, that would be very
But
strange.
yeah, so constituent work has been really amazing.
Was it your constituents who reminded you about some of the programs for parks? Because I watched you advocate for the age-friendly Portland programs, especially for seniors, which is a demographic that gets forgotten often. It gets forgotten in when we talk about homelessness too. And it's
Yeah.
coming to the spotlight now because it can no longer be forgotten. But what we don't talk about is people getting older, not maybe feeling confident enough to go to a gym and do those things. Maybe they do. I mean, my gym, I do see it, but if you can't afford that, or if it's too far away and maybe the park is a quarter-mile walk. I watched you advocate so hard for that. Did it come from your constituents?
Yeah, it came directly from them at one of our budget town halls, one of our listening sessions. And I was sitting there taking notes of every single thing that was brought up. And that one really stood out. We had a lot of people come and explain to us, look, these trainers work with mostly older Portlanders who are using these services because maybe their insurance doesn't cover some of these
Yeah.
things that they need. One of the trainers that I met and got to speak with, most of their clients have Parkinson's. And just folks being able to break it down and really talk about their own lived experience was really important and valuable. And what I think is exactly why we have this new form of government and 3 counselors for each district who are really supposed to be listening and amplifying voices. I do see the main goal of my job is to bring community voices and like movement energy into City Hall and to be bringing City Hall and opportunities out into the district and out to the people. And so, yeah, that personal trainer's position, which I was glad. I mean, it passed. It wasn't a 7-5. It passed. I can't remember with quite a bit of support. And I have been pretty vocal about what does it mean to reaffirm and recommit to Portland being an age-friendly place. That's something that the late Commissioner Nick Fish was really passionate about and is something that I care a lot about. Portland needs to be a place that, it's great to grow up in and grow older in. I live in an intergenerational living situation with my parents, and it's just I'm seeing up close how important it is to be able to age around community. What we see in studies is having community and connection is like one of the most important things for health. And and then this just connects to every area, including our unhoused neighbors too. So many of them are older adults, and that percentage is just going to keep rising. So
Mhm.
yeah, have been lifting up that topic. And same with the other things I brought to around the Montevilla picnic shelter, around preserving the urban forestry staff within Portland, permitting and development. Those all were things that other community members had alerted me to.
The permitting and development work, can you unpack that a little bit also? I know there was a plan to consolidate the permitting services. I'm also aware of being an IT person and almost having a job doing it, of implementing a permitting workflow that I think is 17 years in the making now that still isn't working. Can you talk a little bit more about permitting and development? Because it's always what developers and moneyed interests have been talking about, the biggest obstacle to building and developing in Portland, which never seems to slow anything down anyway.
Right. Well, we all know that Portland is so special for being so green. And, when my friends come visit me from out of state, they're like, oh my gosh, your city is a forest. It is so amazing and beautiful here. And that's such a huge part of what we love about Portland. And protecting our tree canopy and expanding it is incredibly important. In the last budget cycle, a counselor really gutted the urban forestry permitting positions and then also took them out of urban forestry in the parks department and put them in Portland permitting and development. I think that wasn't fully thought out. I believe it was around like 40 to 50 folks doing that tree code work. And then it went down to the 30s. And then in the mayor's proposed budget, he was going to cut another 14. And the folks who are, just fierce advocates for our urban canopy were like, this is horrible already. what we are seeing now because of those cuts and that change. And now Portland Permitting and Development not being as well versed in how to access the Portland Clean Energy Fund dollars, the PSEF dollars, and not understanding as much about urban forestry. It's just been very messy. So it's gone from, hey, you apply to remove a tree and it would take 2 weeks a year ago. Well, now it's taking 8 weeks. And now sometimes permitting folks are coming out and assessing, and people are just getting frustrated and are just cutting their trees down. And it's so important that we are preventing losing large mature trees if possible. We know that new trees and that planting is very important. And also it takes decades to
Yeah.
provide some of those community benefits that the larger, older trees give, like shade and cooling. There's a bike ride I've done that starts out in East Portland, and it's like a shade equity ride, and just to see and feel the difference on a summer day
Yeah.
as you're going from there all the then ending up in Laurelhurst, which is not too far from my home, and saying like, wow, it is multiple degrees cooler when you are covered by these huge trees. It's really notable. So those 14 positions also are AFSCME positions. They are union positions that are important jobs. And so it was really important for us to save those. Also, I mean, when we have so many different groups like the police and the mayor looking to grab PSEF dollars for, I don't know, they're doing like mental gymnastics to find ways that their projects connect to climate work. I mean, this is exactly what we should be using PSEF dollars for. And
Yes.
the Portland Clean Energy Fund committee has said, use it for this. So these are also positions that were PSEF funded, and it just doesn't make sense that why we're cutting them. I think what we're seeing in this budget too is not clarity on, with some of these positions that the mayor proposes to cut that are PSEF funded, well, where are those funds going? It's seeming a little bit mushier than we'd like to see. And that's something for the next budget I want to be clearer on. What are the PSEF funded positions? Some of them are fully funded, some of them are part-time funded, and which ones are you cutting, and then what happens with those funds? So we need to be very clear about that. And that's part of what you were saying, Kat. Folks are more open to public dollars going towards public investments, towards the government, if they know that they're being used wisely. So it's really important that we are being clear and we're being really good stewards of these funds.
Well, I assumed he was cutting positions that may have been PSEF funded so that the PSEF fund would be larger for him to then snag for MOTA, snag for police, snag for anyone that he feels is on his side, is the only word I can think of. So he was making sure the pot would be big enough to fund his things.
That is possible. And as we're looking at some different options with PSEF and the PSEF interest, it's wondering of, is this kind of like silently being earmarked for MOTA possibly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was just my thought, because I mean, he's not just randomly cutting things. Some of this felt very intentional, especially when, like I said, everyone's pulling threads, which was brilliant. And it was like, oh, that's a PSEF fund? Why? And then it was like, oh.
Do we want to get into the MOTA debacle and the things that we're learning more and more?
Let's go.
All right. So I don't even know where things are at. The last I heard was the governor earmarking $375 million to invest towards it. Then the new owner of the Blazers cut 30% of the staff or something. And the more that comes to light about the people who've been pushing for it and advocating and backroom deals with secret code names, can we just shut this shit down somehow? Or what's your understanding? What can we do without like chaining ourselves to the door of the Moda Center saying you don't get to tear it down?
Yep. That is great. How can we shut this shit down? All right. I can share with you what I've been doing and some opportunities to make sure that your voice and listeners' voices are heard. I started being told, I would say about a year ago, that the Moda Center needed renovations and it had to happen and we had to give public funds, but don't ask too many questions. And if you seem like you're hesitant at all, then you're going to lose your election. It's just horrible politically because if the Blazers leave and it's because of you, it's going to be really bad. So here, just smile and hold this Blazers jersey and smile for some photo ops. And it felt pretty strange and confusing to me. I could tell that we were definitely being lobbied, seeing, every month or so, different counselors being invited to come sit in a fancy suite at at a Blazer game. How they're able to do that is if we participate in our official capacity and do something ceremonial, like start the game ball or go on to the court and wave and I don't know, do something like present a plaque, then they can invite us and it's legal. So that's, yeah, I think a bad look, but it doesn't break any lobbying rules there. So at the state, in the short session, there was that package that was really pushed through. And we kind of kept getting asked as counselors to sign on to these letters to be like, yay, state legislature, do this. We support it. And I was using the role I was playing was like, hey, I need to see in that letter some mentioning of community benefit agreements, of labor peace agreement, of like real conversations about shared revenue and how this is going to benefit the people. And so I would kind of like help them with the letters a little bit. And then I did see, especially in the Senate, just ways that any elected that was kind of standing up or speaking out or asking questions were really like hand slapped and just kind of like, that was not really allowed. And it was very much just pushed through. And at the same time over the last year, especially at my kids' own sports games, I've just been kind of talking to parents like, hey, do you like the Blazers? How do you feel? Like, oh yeah, you've heard that we might have cuts in your kids' classroom. How do you feel about money going to the Moda Center? The city does own it, but we're talking about hundreds of millions. These are some choices when we're seeing the state legislature choose to not fully fund special education. There was a effort to do that, but there is money for the Moda Center renovations. Like that's pretty confusing. And just starting to have these conversations in community and have people say like, yeah, I love the Blazers. I don't want them to go, but also like, I need more information. And that doesn't seem right that we're going to be making all these cuts to these important core services, but then like have checkbook to make sure that this billionaire doesn't leave because we're really afraid about the Blazers leaving, which to be clear, my husband and my boys, they love the Blazers. Like, I don't really care about sports. That's kind of like secret. I just find them boring, but I can appreciate like the joy they bring to people's lives. And, sometimes I'll go to games. I'm usually there for like the snacks, but, we cheer for the Blazers, don't want the Blazers to leave. And also just was seeing how, this should be a negotiation. I'm a union organizer. And so just to see us really posturing ourselves in this way that just looks so weak rather than a position of strength was just really confusing to me. I felt kind of gaslit. And so when SB 1501 was passed, everyone signed this letter that was like, yay for it being passed. We applaud this. And something snapped to me. And I was like, I'm not ready to applaud this. I will not sign that letter. They're like, well, what if we change this and this? And I'm like, great, change it. But like, I'm not signing it. And I actually don't care if I don't get elected because I'm saying, wow, ceiling tiles are falling on children's heads at the elementary school down my street, but like the Moda Center bar really needs to be like renovated, really. And that's what we're seeing now is that like the majority of the projects that they're planning to do at the Moda Center, the vast majority are things like improving the suites and re-renovating the locker rooms, even though they've been renovated twice not too long ago. And like the store, like it's like, these are not essential things, you guys. Come teach for one day in the third grade classroom I was at Sunnyside that would get up to 91 degrees sometimes. Like, and then you tell me what needs renovation. So I just felt like I just need to start speaking out. I got overwhelming support from constituents saying, thank you for saying something. We're feeling gaslit. Like, wait, this is just going to happen? And like, we can't stop this. And since then, we're seeing more and more of my colleagues speak out. I'm glad about that. I was invited to be part of this small group So now what we have to do is at the city side, we have a huge role in the lease and also in deciding if we're going to put any money in and what the stipulations will be. And so now that the county has promised to give some money and the state has promised to give a lot of money, it's now at the city level. So I was invited to be part of this small group of 4 counselors to kind of help talk through negotiations. But then when I found out that there was an expectation that we'd be under a non-disclosure agreement and that we wouldn't really be able to be like open with the public, I was like, well, that's not going to work because for me, transparency and accountability are the biggest parts of this. And I
For
would
elected
be
officials, go figure. Yeah.
exactly. And so I've just decided like, okay, then I'm just gonna like talk about this and be a little bit of a pain in the ass. And I have a great relationship with Council President Dunphy, but he'd tell me like, you're being a little bit of a pain in the ass. And I was like, well, that's kind of the point because I don't like how this is happening and I'm not going to support another backroom deal. And if you're going to do it, like you're going to have to do that without me because the way that I want to do this will involve community and have them have a say in this, thinking about almost like participatory budgeting. Like you have to convince my neighbors. You have to tell them what the options are and what the trade-offs are. So Dunphy did say, well, it would be great if you could like give me some other options. And so I helped him think through and he took a lot of my ideas. So actually there are going to be listening sessions in June throughout Portland in each district. So constituents can give feedback. There's going to be a survey. There's going to be more work done out in the open. Because I was like, look, do it at committee of the whole, like do it in a work session. So that's where we're at right now. And I think if the mayor really, really wanted to push this through, he could really try right now and maybe could have 7 votes. But I will tell you, temperature check wise, the public is not happy with this at all. Councilors Murillo and Novak have seen this, but whenever we're in front of like a lot of people, like 100, 200 people, we were at a city club event, we were at a neighborhood association. I'm like, all right, I believe I work for you. You all are my boss. So I'd love to just take a poll right now. How are you feeling if you feel comfortable about public dollars going to the Moda Center? Like you really get to decide. I want to know what you think so I can bring your voice into City Hall. Yes, no, maybe so. I was just at Rose City Park. They have a big neighbor association. 0 people raised their hand for yes. 0. And yeah. And so I've also when I'm with some of my colleagues, especially the ones that are progressive, who like are obsessed with the Blazers. So it might be a little bit like clouded at times with their judgment. When I'm in front of like union members, I was in front of a bunch at PSU. I did the same thing. And so I was just like, all right, I want all my colleagues this is just information for us. It's important.
I appreciate that. And I was not aware of the listening sessions coming up. So that's great input. I got invited to see Bruce Springsteen a few weeks ago, which was an amazing concert. And I was prepared to pay $15 for beer and wound up. The shortest line was a self-serve, I think it's Amazon booth for beer, wine, and soda. And you just pay as you walk in and you grab what you want and scan on your way out. I'm like, for 15, 16 bucks for a $2 can of beer, why is this not self-funded?
Great questions. Do you know about street pricing?
Yeah, well, PDX, right?
Yeah, like the airport. I mean, that's something, if you think about what's going to make Portlanders excited, it's being able to actually bring your family there and be able to enjoy an event. I took my boys and took them to the Moda Center not too long ago to see some NCAA basketball playoffs, whatever it's called. I don't know. They were very excited about it. But candy was like $10 a box,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, that's like out of reach for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's like who is this for? Because at first we were being told they need a new HVAC, they need some other stuff. I'm sure they do. And I was like, I get that, but that cannot be this price tag. And it's like, if this gets pushed through, and the mayor made promises that I don't know if he can keep. If this gets pushed through, you may find ticket sales go down. You may find people just stop going, especially if it's really just to make food more expensive and things look good for a certain class of people. That's not from us 3 here. I can't afford those sweets. I can't afford to spend $40 on food after I've already spent $100 on a ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So,
I know, like, if I knew that every tickets sold at the Moda Center, like if a percentage of that went straight to our public schools or to public transportation, things that like we could really point to and be like, wow, that's where some of the proceeds are going. I mean, I tell my husband, like, okay, go ahead. You can get season tickets then. Um, I think exactly what you're saying, Kat. Like that's what I hear from most Portlanders. Like, who is this for? What's the benefit? And it can't be a benefit that's like this. Just trust it's going to trickle down to you, and it's going to help this economic development. Like, no, like literally, like I don't know, can high school graduations be in that space? Like, I
Mhm.
think most people don't think of the Moda Center as like really a public space. Like, what are some things that would make it feel that
Yeah,
way?
it's
And I
not
think,
accessible to most people, it's just too
yeah.
expensive, and yeah, if my $15 beer, $3 went to air conditioning in a middle school, I'd feel a lot better about it, I'd still be pissed, but I feel you on that, so, um, I did wanna share real briefly, because I'm very proud of it, but I do have the OEA Strong Coffee, Strong Union mug. I should have brought
Yes.
it out initially, so but,
Love it. Love my union.
totally on board with y'all. I think we could talk about the grossness of the Moda Center for a long time, but do wanna talk about that, in the new, charter reform, districts, 3 and 4 were only initially for 2-year terms, because they were traditionally overrepresented in city council, where districts 1 and 2 were 4-year terms, which also helps with the whole staggering thing. So there is a election, I guess, coming up soon. Go figure. Do you have some time to talk about the things that you want to put forward in your next term, which would be for 4 years, and a little bit about your burgeoning campaign? But love to hear about your thoughts of what you want to see happen and your intentions going forward.
Yes, I am part of one of the districts where it's a 2-year term at first. And then if I win in this upcoming November election, it'll be a 4-year term, which I am running again and would be really excited to be able to have a good 4 years and really see through a lot of the things that I have been working on and have started. I have felt this. I've taught every grade, kindergarten through fifth grade, and it has felt like anytime I switched a grade level or switched a school, it takes about a year to kind of be like, all right, I feel more settled. I kind of have the lay of the
Mhm.
land. And something did really click around a year. And I just feel like my team is very solid. Our priorities are solid. Have been really proud to do things like recommit to Vision Zero, which is the goal of having zero major traffic injuries or deaths on our streets. Been able to get a big chunk of funding for traffic safety. Also, part of that transportation utility fee is that I brought an amendment for 20% of that to go towards Vision Zero and sidewalk infill traffic safety. Starting as the first council vice president, was able to take the lead on a lot of the federal overreach work and helped with, along with Councilor Canal and Councilor Avalos, put our sanctuary status into code and
Mhm.
also direct the mayor on quite a few different things we wanted him to do to protect Portlanders. And that was with the guidance of a lot of our Latinx city employees and different community groups that do immigrant justice work. Was able in February to expand sanctuary status to the LGBTQIA2S plus community through a big package that had a variety of things. And one of them specifically is, if you're here coming to Portland or you're here in Portland and you're getting gender affirming care, similar sanctuary status protections, we're not going to help the federal government mess with that at all. Expanding the definition of what a family is,
Mhm.
making sure that there are some changes around gender neutral bathroom signage around Portland. So would love to keep continuing on that work. Some of my favorite things that I get to do is I have groups that I meet with regularly. So I meet with a group and we talk about um, public transportation, traffic safety, and Vision Zero. And so we have some ideas of legislation we want to bring forward, some that are specific to school areas, like directing PBOT to put four-way stops on every corner adjacent to a school, and some other things that really target high crash corridors. When I first got into office, everyone was like, oh, there's no way you're going to get all of your colleagues to support Vision Zero. Like, it's pretty polarizing. People will say like, oh, it's like anti-business. And unanimously, I got everyone to support. And when I did that 20% amendment with the tough, it was with Councilor Zimmerman.
Mm.
And folks are like, what? Look how far you brought him along. He was kind of like, oh, look at these cyclists can be annoying. And I was like, but what about pedestrians? He's like, yeah, I like pedestrians. I'm like, all right, let that be your lane. Come on in, sir. Let's talk about traffic safety together. Now the mayor's talking more about Vision Zero. And so I'm just glad that there's more visibility. I also created a new position where someone came out of PBOT and was elevated to the Deputy City Administrator's Office in Public Works, and she does citywide Vision Zero work, which is really important because Vision Zero isn't just PBOT. You need to have like tactical groups that can bring
Yes.
fire and police and business and all these different folks together. And so I've been making progress there too and want to continue that. And affordability is just the top of so many people's minds. We really need to be a city that can be affordable to both work in and live in. And that includes renters, young adults, people of color, older adults, seniors, immigrant families. And another one of my budget notes directs the Public Works DCA to come back to us and tell us a bit more about rate design and utility design. And what would that look like if we were to redo some of that and have there be some more progressive structures. And especially with, there's a lot of concerns about water costs and the Bull Run treatment plan and all that. And so trying to be as transparent as possible and also really listening to constituents who are saying, hey, we're really struggling to just pay our bills. What are you going to do here? And so that budget note would say, come back to us with a report on how we can move forward on some of this rate redesign work.
That's phenomenal, and that's all you've done in a year and a half? I mean, come on.
I'm like, I don't have my list up in front of me, but I think there's more too.
No, there's absolutely more.
Oh, there's definitely more. I do also remember you talking about the self-driving cars and how concerning that is, especially Vision Zero, bad directions. Maybe it'll drive into the river. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, Waymo, very scary. They got some restrictions slapped on them in San Francisco. And so they're trying to come here to Portland. And they currently are mapping our streets. So they haven't applied to like have their autonomous vehicles, their AVs running yet, but this is the first step. And so Councilor Green and I were both on the Public Works Committee. We're looking into what can we do to make sure that traffic safety, is going to be prioritized, and what can we do to make sure that companies can't just plop in these weird vehicles without some real data and protections. So more to come on that for sure.
Anybody who lives here knows that driving in Portland is a nightmare to begin with because our streets were basically designed prior to vehicles, and that just from a technical standpoint, something to consider is that there are plenty of dead spots signal-wise around Portland just because of landscape, buildings, and lack of consistent infrastructure. So having a self-driving car will be a nightmare for so many different reasons, and it's not needed. And hopefully, maybe we can do a referendum or something. But I appreciate you picking that up.
Our drivers union, that is a group that's organizing themselves. They're really worried too about how that will affect jobs. And you can you can Google and see some of the very strange situations that people are getting in with Waymos, like people being in a Waymo and then it getting pulled over by a police officer. And then it's like, what do I do here? Or they're just malfunctioning and are stopping in bike lanes. There's some not great things you can just Google easily.
Yeah.
I would rather we invest in a robust transit system and have more taxis. I miss taxis more than I want Uber and Lyft. I love the idea that I could just hail a cab. It's like, oh, I have too many groceries. Shit, do I wait 20 minutes for an Uber or can I walk up to the corner and be like, hey, we don't have that. I would rather have that.
There's also, I've been interested to learn in Colorado, they have their own drivers co-op that's owned by drivers. And I think that could be something interesting for us to explore at some point.
Yeah, I would rather find a way to get people out of a gig economy, get them out of paying their own income tax, the pass-through taxes you have to pay, because it costs more to actually be an independent contractor than to work for somebody else. Also, if there were taxi companies or some sort of company like that, then you know that the drivers are vetted and they have protections, and the cars maybe will be situated in a way that they won't get hurt and then I won't get hurt, because the nightmare stories of women in Ubers, and
Mhm.
then also the fear that drivers have of being a driver and being also assaulted. It's a two-way street. I would rather we invest in things that make our lives easier and not make our lives more isolated.
And just benefit a major corporation that are actually, human being centered and not necessarily, end stage capitalism centered. There I go, I'm a communist again. Speaking of communism, let's talk about progress that you guys have made towards social housing plans and where you see that going forward, especially as I'm assuming you're gonna be reelected. We saw reports recently that more than half renters are rent burdened. I make a decent living when I'm not laid off, which has happened frequently, and I'm rent burdened. And then I just saw something about a lot of the federal tax dollars that are coming in for affordable housing is still priced out of the range of most people in Portland. What are next steps on how we invest in city owned and financed managed housing that will actually help solve some of these problems?
Yes. Social housing is something I've been so excited about, talked about on the campaign trail. And it was last April, April 2025, where we adopted a resolution to say we want to explore social housing models and directed the Portland Housing Bureau to do that. And that study is happening. Things are moving in that direction. And with those found PHB, Portland Housing Bureau dollars, a large chunk of those are going towards social housing. So that's really, really exciting, and is also another area where we've been able to have folks, many different electeds, be interested in this and say, hey, actually, it's important that we have housing where humans are centered rather than a profit margin, and can be universal accessibility, and that it's something that we're really taking seriously, the affordability piece, because housing costs continue to go up here in Portland, and it's really important that the folks who are making our coffee and teaching our kids and taking care of our parents are able to also live here in Portland. So social housing is really exciting, and there are cities all across the country that are leading this. And Seattle is really interesting to look at. I am in touch with a couple city councilors up there that have been
Mm,
pushing this, and they've been like a couple steps ahead of us. So very, very exciting.
right on. I know we've been talking for a while. Are there any things that we haven't touched on that we should have asked you about that you'd like to talk about?
I feel like we hit on quite a bit. I will say, it means a lot to me to um, to be the first Asian American woman ever elected to Portland city government.
Oh, it's a big deal to me, for me.
Thank you
Mhm.
for saying that. Yeah, I've
You know
I've
you
had
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's It's a lot. It's heavy to be the first, and there are times where I'm like, "Wow, I wish there were other women
Yeah.
AAPI women up here," but I'm also very dedicated to not being the last, and it's been special, to be able to also do this alongside Councilor Canal, because
Mhm.
before us, there had never been anyone Asian American ever elected to Portland City Council. He was cute. We actually, when we signed our documents that were like, "We're officially electeds now," he was like, "Okay, let's sign at the same time. 1, 2, 3." So we're neither of us are first. And yeah, so that has been special, and just wanted to highlight that. And there are times where even this job can just feel like, wow, really under the microscope, where people are saying really weird things about my body or my identity. I remember that it's important that I'm here as a mom who goes home to two young kids, as a union member, as fourth generation Japanese American. There are it's really impactful when there are people that are like, I see you up there, and I think like maybe I could do that, or I see myself represented in a different way. And so
Absolutely.
that's something that really means a lot.
Really, really appreciate that. And you need to convince my youngest kid to run for office, being Asian American also. And kind of, she swears a lot though, so it'll add some more color to the diet.
Yeah. We can talk about code switching,
Yeah,
time and
no, I'll
place,
get
but
you guys connected. So.
let's bring her in. Bring her in. Yeah, I always love. Yesterday, a group of middle schoolers came from Sunnyside Environmental School, so they were a bunch of them I had taught, and they had a tour and they asked me questions. They came and sat in the chambers, and I even got them 15 minutes with the mayor, and they
Oh,
pitched
nice.
him different policy ideas. And so it's just the best when we can have youth in City Hall, because I'm like, this is the people's hall. We work for you. If people are
Mhm.
not listening, you work to vote them out. And also imagine yourself here working in
Yeah,
this building, maybe sitting on this dais. I love that.
fantastic. All right, so wrap things up, 2 things. How can people follow you on city council, and also how people can follow your campaign?
Wonderful. So on the city council side, if you go to my city website, portland.gov/Koyama Lane, KOYAMALANE, you can sign up for my newsletter. You can email me through that. You can see different news and updates. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Councilor Koyama Lane, or on the campaign side, it's Teacher Tiffany for the People. And am I allowed to kind of talk about campaign
Yeah,
side stuff?
please.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
please keep
with my
going. Yeah,
campaign hat on,
yeah.
I I don't know if you know, I was the top fundraiser out of everyone in the 2024 election. I got the most donations, even more than Keith Wilson
Then, no.
individually. So he was close. So sometimes I'm like, all right, you're a good fundraiser too. Game recognizes game. But I'm also leading this pack also this time and have the most donations. And part of that is I'm participating in the small donors election program. And so I'm pledging not to take any big donations, anything over 350, nothing from big PACs or businesses. So my campaign is really supported by everyday Portlanders just chipping in $5. And the city will match your $5 and turn it into 55 if you're a Portland resident, which is awesome. And that's up to 25. So if you give 25, it becomes 275, which is just, it makes it so an everyday Portlander can give an amount like
Mhm.
5, 10, and it makes a huge difference. So if you can give a small donation at teachertiffanyforthepeople.com, that would mean the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
That's how I met you, actually. You were doing the Rosehaven Mother's Day walk. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
was tabling when I was the executive director at Sisters of the Road. And it was very funny. I didn't know you. I knew of you. And you walked right up to me and you were like, hey. And I was like, hi.
I totally
And
remember this. I remember exactly where we were under that overpass.
yes. And talked to me as if we had met many times. And it was like, it's the first time I'm actually meeting you in person. And we talked about all the stuff going on. And it was like, all right.
Yep.
She better freaking win.
Yep. And I remember because I was like, oh, I brought my students to Sisters of the Road and thank you for the work that you're doing. And
yeah. And it was just like, okay, hi.
yeah, you can see how I'm a good fundraiser. I'm
Yeah.
like, let's talk.
Yeah, just ran right up and I saw you do that with all the other tabling and every other person in the crowd, and it was like, oh, she knows how to talk to people. Holy
And a
shit.
good representative too. So,
Yeah.
no, absolutely.
Thank
We
you. That
appreciate
means a
you.
lot. All right. Well, I'll come back anytime you guys want. Thank you so
Alright.
much for having
Careful,
me.
we'll take you up on it. But
After
thank you
you
so
win.
much, Tiffany.
After you
Yeah.
win.
For sure.
Or
All
if
right.
something else comes up that you really need to talk about and get in front of our 17 listeners, please let us know. So
Love it.
thank you.
Great. Thanks
really
so
good talking.
much.
All right,
Bye.
Progress Portland is also on Facebook and Instagram, and we have event listings and updates on our website, progressportland.org. There's a content form on our website if you'd like to help out or have questions or comments. Our theme music is by the Portland band Helvetia.